Hey dudettes and dudles, and welcome to Sweeney's first week. As most of you know, I have a cockatiel named Hamilton who just turned 2 years old the 25th of April. And as some of you know, I picked up my baby kakariki on the 22nd of May. The breeder has no idea when exactly he hatched, so based off a rough estimate, I've decided his hatch day is the 9th of April, so I have 2 April babies, both named after musicals. The trip to my breeder's bird farm was a 3-hour drive, so Mama Sky was gracious enough to offer me a ride, which included some breaks, so in total it was a 3.5-hour trip. We started the journey at 6:30 a.m. and arrived at 10 a.m. I had visited Sweeney the 5th of May, so we had already seen each other, but this time Sweeney decided to greet me by latching onto the skin between the thumb and index finger, something he didn't do when we first met. It definitely proved to me that yes, kakariki beaks are stronger than cockatiel beaks. After picking Sweeney up, we took him to an avian vet who was incredibly skilled and professional and told me Sweeney was a happy, healthy boy, even though he did say he wanted him to gain a bit more weight. Luckily, my breeder had already given me food for that exact purpose. The trip home was amazing. Unlike Hamilton when I brought him home, Sweeney was in general a lot braver and more curious. My mom and I swooned every time he made those tiny kakariki sounds, and a week after, I still gushed over them. He clowned around inside the carrier and thoroughly enjoyed the breaks where he got to come outside and feel the air for the first time. He didn't seem at all nervous, opposite Hamilton, who was frozen in place during the whole ride home 2 years ago. To be fair though, that ride was a lot shorter than this one. At 3 p.m. we were finally home and it was time for Hamilton and Sweeney to finally meet. I kept Sweeney inside the carrier and carried Hamilton over to him. At first, Hamilton couldn't really see Sweeney, the carrier was a bit too dark inside, but once he saw him, he made quite the face. Sweeney was then put in his side of the cage and he immediately started climbing around and checking everything out before going to the bottom of the cage to start munching on some food. Hamilton was extremely wary of Sweeney, and despite my encouragement, he just didn't seem to want to have that much to do with him. Something I was 100% expecting. My theory was it was gonna be a very similar situation to back when I was just a teenager and my mom and I were bringing home puppy Aslan to an adult Papillon Kovu. Aslan wanted to cuddle and play with Kovu, and Kovu wanted nothing to do with him. Hamilton and Kovu were clearly spirit animals. Hamilton spent the night outside the cage, which is something he does pretty often, mostly when I don't have to get up early the next morning. It also seems smart to give them both some space for the time being. The next day, I started doing the overall same thing I did when I got Hamilton. I talked to Sweeney, put my hand on the cage, and made sure to engage with him without scaring him. He already seemed less scared of me than Hamilton did when I first got him, and I think the reason for that is because kakarikis are by nature very curious birds, so they're less likely to be scared of new things in comparison to other birds. I put Hamilton in his side of the cage for 15 minutes while sitting next to them. The cage is built with a barrier in between the two sides, so Hamilton and Sweeney can get close to each other if they want, but they can't actually get to each other. Hamilton was hyper aware of Sweeney's presence and hissed whenever he moved, whereas Sweeney just seemed to either ignore Hamilton or just be content with the situation. This also gave me the opportunity to show Sweeney that Hamilton willingly steps up on my finger and then gets to come out of the cage. I started noticing the differences more between Hamilton and Sweeney at this point. Like, Sweeney spends a lot more time drinking water and he uses his feet a lot more by holding his food with them and climb around the cage. He also seems more confident in his agility than Hamilton does. Maybe he can learn something from Sweeney as time goes by. On the 3rd day, Sweeney escaped from the cage while I was trying to collect yesterday's food at the bottom of his cage. We sat on my wardrobe for a while, but I also made sure to say hello to the curtain, my stuffed birds on top of the cage, and he also tried to say hello to Hamilton, but he just wasn't having it. He kept a good distance from Sweeney for a long time. Sweeney did accidentally land on my hand once though, in one of his attempts at getting close to Hamilton. He didn't stay that long, but it was still a fun little oopsie. Within just a few hours, Sweeney had already been loads of places Hamilton never has. Like the shelf above the door, on top of the wardrobe, hanging in the curtains, and just overall been much more curious and brave. A few hours into the day, Hamilton finally stayed on one of the playgrounds when Sweeney flew to sit there as well. He almost sat there for a whole minute before he inevitably flew away. 6 hours into the day though, they sat together on the smallest of the playgrounds for a couple of minutes. Hamilton even booped Sweeney with his beak, almost as if he was testing if Sweeney was real. Throughout the rest of the day, Sweeney both took a bath, sat on my chair, and he and Hamilton even ate together. When I put Hamilton into his side of the cage, Sweeney actively climbed around and tried to figure out ways to get inside. I'm not sure if he was too dumb to realize that going into his side of the cage would bring him closer to Hamilton, or if he was so smart that he knew getting into his side of the cage would still not get him as close to Hamilton as he wanted to be. I finally had to grab Sweeney when he went to climb around the curtain. He wasn't happy with me, but didn't try to bite me either. Both Hamilton and Sweeney seemed to have a nice relaxed night though. My initial plan of not allowing Sweeney out of the cage until he was so comfortable with me that he'd step up on my hand had already been thrown out the window the day before. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do from now on. To take the baby out or not to take the baby out? That was the question. I soon grew bored with just having him be in the cage though. I also got the feeling he was getting restless in there, so I wound up letting him escape when I went to clean the cage. He was only outside for a few hours before I flew back into the cage though. So I wound up closing the door for the rest of the day and simply engaged with Sweeney as much as possible, along with bringing Hamilton over to the cage. It wound up being one of the most boring days throughout the week. So the next day, I took Sweeney out of the cage again, deciding to change my method once more. At this point, it just felt weird to keep him inside, and I saw more progress being made on days when he got to come outside than when he didn't. Anyway, at the end of the day, Sweeney couldn't be lured into the cage with Hamilton, so he spent the night sleeping on the playground on top of the cage. The same playground Hamilton usually sleeps on when he's outside the cage. There was no trouble at all during the night. Sweeney seems to still be very aware of my hands, but he doesn't move away when he and Hamilton are on one of the playgrounds together and I start petting Hamilton. I actually try to do this as much as possible when Sweeney can see it. It helps him understand that my hands aren't thoroughly evil, even if they do bring him into the cage for nighttime. It's also a good way to make sure that Hamilton doesn't feel left out or somehow forgotten. In comparison to the other times Sweeney has landed on my head, today he stayed there for a full minute. It wasn't just a quick pit stop, he chilled there for a bit. Enough for me to take a picture and film a little bit anyway. I tried once again to see if I could encourage Sweeney to go into the cage himself. I put Hamilton in the cage at 10 p.m, but by 11 p.m, Sweeney still hadn't taken the bait. Sweeney followed me into the bathroom though, and I took that opportunity to grab him when he was sitting near the window. He was unhappy with it obviously, but not so much that he tried to bite me, and he did accept the millet I offered. When he was inside the cage though, he pouted like a true toddler would. There's a reason bird people will tell you that getting a bird is like getting a toddler for life. Despite starting to munch on some food, he still gave me the cold wing. On the final day of the week, Sweeney flew out of the cage on his own without me having to encourage him to do so. He had a tiny accident where he fell between the wall and my desk, so I had to go get him. He still didn't trust my hand, but he did eventually sit on it and let me lift him up. He flew away immediately, but it's the small steps that count. It definitely helps him learn that hands are pretty useful. This was also the day though when Sweeney tried to legit land on Hamilton, and he was not having it. Sweeney also followed me into the bathroom though, something that surprised me since the last time he was in there, he was grabbed and put in his cage. I had imagined he wouldn't go in there for a while, but it reminded me that Sweeney is definitely a kakariki. Their curiosity triumphs over most things. So that was Sweeney's first week. A lot of progress has been made, mostly with Hamilton and Sweeney rather than me and Sweeney. Hopefully Sweeney and Hamilton will continue bonding and become great friends. That's the main goal here. But obviously I want Sweeney and I to be friends too, even if it'll take a lot longer. The biggest difference now in my everyday life is that I have to be a lot more aware of what I'm doing than when I just had Hamilton. Hamilton is a lot more chill and mostly stays in one place for long periods of time, and he won't really follow me into the kitchen or bathroom and such. Sweeney does though. So I have to be aware of these things I didn't have to be before, like making sure he can't get to the stove, closing the toilet lid, and just in general keeping an eye on him. Hamilton I could trust not to fly away near an open window in the bathroom, for example. Sweeney, not even a little bit. I don't trust his little mayhem-seeking nature at all. With that being said, never trust your birds around open windows. That's in general a really terrible idea. I'm just saying that I trust Hamilton to keep himself safe more than I trust Sweeney to do the same. Hamilton trusts his brain and his survival instincts, whereas Sweeney trusts his desire for adventure. Sweeney is basically Seahawk from She-Ra. No, I'm not changing his name. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more of my birds, I recommend you follow me on my Instagram. I post a lot of videos and pictures of them both there. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye! Hamilton trusts his brain and his survival. Hamilton trusts his brain and his I post a lot of videos and pictures of them both there. Sweeney is basically Seahawk. Hamilton, shush!